And I laugh about the fact that I had, in order to escape from the marriage, I escaped to Africa. It's a little dramatic, but it's kind of indicative how entangled I was. I mean, you get kind of enmeshed in situations, and I had to leave. I had to change where I was.
Welcome back to another episode of A Measure of Passion. Today, I have what has turned out to be a wonderful working relationship with a woman I admire immensely. Her name is Lori Pappas, and she and I were introduced doing a talk for The Deconstructed Woman, which is another podcast that I'm involved with. When I met Lori on that podcast, I knew that she was a really special person and had to be featured on A Measure of Passion as well. So before I get too far along, I want to welcome Lori to the podcast. Hi, Lori.
Oh, hi, Jojy. Thanks so much for having me on this. I love talking to you, so this is going to be great. Thank you.
Thank you. And so I want to jump right in. I mean, I want to give a little bit of a bio, sort of a nail sketch to people because I forget I know you well, but the viewers may not know you as well. And you please help fill in the details because I didn't really prepare for that part of it as well as I should have. What I know is that you had a very difficult childhood. You rose above that in your circumstances and knew that you had to carve out a future for yourself that depended on you. With that knowledge, you got involved with the early beginnings of the IT world and computers, and you started a business that was extremely successful. You sold that in your 50s, and then you thought, well, now I can just sort of rest. I've had a full life. I've done what I set out to do. I'm financially stable and I can now rest. And then you soon discovered that your journey was far from over. And you took some time to understand what you wanted to do. And you landed in Africa, helping a group of people and a tribe. And they ended up teaching you a lot in exchange for you helping them create some amenities that they need to live their life. And after that, you returned back to the US. You fell in love deeply with someone you're involved with. And soon after that, you put all of your life's work into this beautiful book called The Magic of Yes. And I want my viewers to see it so that they know that this is available to them as well through Amazon and other online retailers, as well as hopefully we hope that the libraries will be flooded with it as well. So help Lori get her book out there at your public library, and they will get a copy for you and other people to check out in your local community. So Lori, that was like a really quick review of what I remember us talking about, but fill in any details if I've left out any significant parts that you think is important for the foundation of this conversation.
Well, I'm really impressed, Jojy. You did a fabulous job, and you did a great job of netting it out. And so I appreciate that. I think the only thing that I would add to that is I sold the business when I was 49, and I was just really fearful that I would not give back. I mean, I was so grateful for what I had been able to do. And I knew it really was because other people really had helped me. It wasn't just a Lori Pappas show by any means. And I so much wanted to make sure that the first thing we did was I made my husband at the time, my second husband, and I developed a foundation. And it, because I was just afraid that I would forget to give. I was just so fearful that I would get caught up in all of a sudden having money and being able to go places I had never been able to go, that I would forget about everybody else less fortunate. So what was interesting about, and the reason I bring up that little snippet is, so we funded that, and he wanted to make sure that he was in charge. And I said, okay, fine. And it never really did a lot. But naturally inside of me, there was just this burning desire to give. And so I really wouldn't have had to worry about it that much. And I ended up not even using that foundation. I ended up starting a different organization even because by that time I wanted to make sure he wasn't involved because I wanted to be able to give stuff away and do things and not be limited. Um, and I hadn't really thought about that for a long time, but just hearing you go through that, that kind of popped up, and I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting little tidbit. I,
And you know what?
so
If I could just interject here, I think it's fascinating that you have a partnership in a marriage, also maybe in the foundation, but there was this clarity from your partner that he wanted to be in charge, and I think that a lot of women sort of compromise sort of what they know internally as maybe maybe not be the best thing for whatever it is that you're starting, but you sort of have to find a role for each partner, and so you say, okay, we'll do it together. But somehow or another, sometimes we feel diminished in that way. Is that what
right.
was going on with you? Or did you truly fear, excuse me, that the commitment you had to giving might not be reciprocated by your partner?
Well, I think it was quite a bit all of that in that, you know, at that point in my life. So here I am, if we dial back, that would have been 25 years ago because I'm 75 right now. And 25 years ago, I was still caught up in a lot of supposed tos as far as this is exactly what you're saying, as far as the role of a woman and whatever. And even though he had not been involved at all in my business, which was now supporting us, he wanted to make sure that he got credit. And I kind of wrote that off as okay, that's his issue, but it bugged me. It did irritate me. So then when it came to the foundation, um, I thought, well, let's just give him a chance. Let's see what he can do. And it turned out that he really didn't do anything at all. So when I decided I was going to work in Africa and I needed to have a 501c3, um, I made sure that he wasn't a part of it because I wanted to be fully in control. And I think that the beauty, the real secret behind that was probably 5 years later, 6 years later. And during that interim, I had done a lot of personal work. And so I had come into my own power. I had grown and I had done my inner child work. And I wouldn't say I was 100% at self love, but I definitely had some idea that, yeah, well, maybe I was worthy. And so I definitely had started that transition. I was definitely on that road of healing.
And
And
how
I
long
think,
and how long after that did you give up the shoulds? Because that I think is a critical conversation for especially us women. We have all these messages we receive from the moment we come into this world that we should, you know, give this up, or we should do this, or we should let another do that. And so, given the fact that you were doing this kind of very, revolutionary sort of inner child work, do you think that was the beginning of that, or do you think that was really more the end of it, or you were just working through it and you were making good progress? Because I think that's an important milestone in your life,
yeah,
whenever you get there.
yeah, absolutely. I I'm going to dial back just a little bit because, and I think this is really, really an important point. I grew up in a very religious home where if people did not believe the way we believed, they would go to hell, and that was non-negotiable. And I can remember even as being a very small child thinking, well, that's not very fair. I mean, if I'm the only one and the people that believe like me are the ones that are going to go to heaven, what about all these people that never had a chance to learn how to believe the way I do? I mean, it just never seemed fair. So that was always percolating in the background for me. And a big issue, a part of that was the whole idea of evolution. That was like you couldn't even think about evolution because that was sinful. God created the world in 7 days, and that's all there was to it. Well, that never really computed for me either, but I wasn't ready to put all my energy into trying to figure it out. So now, if we fast forward to when I was 50 and I had sold the business and I had money, one of the first trips that my husband wanted to go on was to Antarctica. And I thought, well, okay, I never really thought about it, but why not? And we went on this expedition that ended up coming back into the southernmost tip of South America, Ushuaia, and then went over into Patagonia. And in Patagonia, there we went into this cave of the Meladon, and this hypothetical, imaginary, evolutionary animal that I had always been taught that there was no such thing as evolutionary animals. But I saw evidence of it. I saw evidence of it. And by that time, I was no longer working. I was 50 years old, and I had time to think about it. And then not long after that, we were traveling in China. And I would never forget, I'm standing in this museum and I'm looking at these displays. And I start thinking about what I'm seeing and where these people must have been in the evolutionary process to make what I was looking at. And so that started creating chinks in my supposed to belief system. And I had time. And I think that's the other thing, Jojy, is that I was I was so fortunate to have time to think because before that, a lot of these things didn't compute for me. But I was busy running my business. I had 3 kids. I was in an unhappy marriage. I was trying to make dinner. Whenever I sat down to try to think about something, I fell asleep. So it having the time to think, I think, is really critical because these are big issues. Challenging your supposed tos. It's just a big issue.
Yes.
And it's not something that you're going to say, okay, next Saturday, I'm going to sit down and think about my supposed tos. But if you allow those seeds to start percolating, to just start thinking about a little bit about, well, does this really match the facts that I know? And do I want to look at this or that? And you don't need to come to a resolution right at the moment. But if you let some of these things percolate and then you go back and revisit it, eventually, I think you're able to determine your own moral compass. And then that is the thread of you're supposed to.
Well, let me talk about this for a minute. So I realized that in my 20s and my 30s, I kept myself full of white noise around me, almost to prevent myself from thinking about anything because I
Mm-hmm.
felt a little stuck. Like I
Mm-hmm.
felt like I didn't have any choices. And so as long as I wasn't thinking, I was safe. And it's actually my current husband who said to me, uh, sort of reflected this to me, like I'm always surrounded by noise. And because I was somebody who never walked away from a moment to self reflect if I was given the, I don't know, maybe the challenge, I sort of started thinking about that and I started to become more comfortable. And of course, as we do meditation, we also have to become comfortable with quiet. It's so very important to the meditative process. And so that really challenged me to spend more time doing that. But I guess the point that I'm trying to get to is many of us are comfortable with noise. What do you think separates you from other people? Or do you think that it was the time in your life where you knew you had more work to do? What do you think broke through that? Yes, you had time on your hands, but there are plenty of people who have time who don't make use of that time. So what do you think separates yourself from those other individuals?
Wow. Well, I know what finally broke through and made me realize I really needed to address some of my own personal pathology that I was carrying with me, my own emotional baggage. And that was really a horrible event. My son was 19 years old and he was driving his car, hit a patch of ice, it flipped over, spun on the top, and he ended up with traumatic brain injury. And it, um, and I'll never forget the day that night, but there was a knock on the door, and we were living on Bainbridge Island off of Seattle, Washington. There was a knock on the door. It turned out it was a policeman and a chaplain saying that we needed to leave immediately. They were holding the ferry for us because we had to get over to the hospital if we wanted to see our son alive. And so we did that. And I'll never forget David, being able to see David being rolled down the hallway with shunt coming out of his head, and it's just surreal, that whole process. Well, kind of to move through that, he was in the trauma center for 6 weeks, and because I was alive and not working, and curious, I was able to help manage his care because he was seen by 11 different services.
Wow.
And fortunately, we got him through that. Well, after that time, um, he ended up being addicted to drugs, and one thing after another. Eventually, he ended up in a rehab center, and he had family week, and he invited me to his family week. I was sitting in this session, and the instructor was talking about PTSD. I never heard about PTSD. It wasn't really part of my vocabulary, post traumatic stress disorder. And I realized that that's what had happened to me from David's accident. Because now, whenever I heard a siren or any loud noise, the startle impact was just incredible. Well, I went up and I asked the instructor, could that be possible? They said, oh, absolutely. And then I said, well, by the way, do you think I could have suffered PTSD when my mother was convinced that I was possessed by the devil and I ended up being committed to a nut house? And they said, oh, yeah, I think that you probably did suffer some PTSD. And I was so thrilled. I was just thrilled because that meant I could change a variable. And by now, from my business career, I knew that the only way you can impact change is if you have control of variables. So this was language that I understood, that I could make a change, and maybe that would help me feel better, my kids feel better, and I could be a better support for my son. So I really embraced therapy. In fact, I enrolled myself in the trauma track of a rehab center because I wanted to get to the bottom of what was causing disruption in my family, because I realized that my daughters weren't happy, that they were struggling, but I couldn't figure out why. I couldn't figure out why my family wasn't a Leave It to Beaver family, wasn't a happy family, because I so wanted that. And during that inner child work and that rehab work, I came to understand that I had grown up in a shame-based family system for generations. And this was my opportunity to break that cycle. And that I had become an enabler, that I was enabling behavior versus helping develop the potential of my daughters and my son in the way that would have been healthier for them. I was always fixing problems. I wasn't allowing them to make mistakes and learn on their own. And so it just thrilled me that there was something I could change. And so that was my motivation to do all that different personal work. And I did everything I could think of.
So it sounds like things had your family situation sort of came to a head, sort of initiated by your son's accident,
Hmm.
and then recognizing PTSD, and then looking at the unhappiness you were observing with your daughters.
Hmm.
All of this came together and gave you sort of the impetus to say, okay, what do I need to do here? And then you started to dismantle the family of shame, the culture of shame that you had been raised in,
Hmm.
which is a lot to unpack, given everything that was going on in your life at that time. And I'm sure that it took an amount of time to get through that. But soon after that, you also journeyed to Africa to help out a community there. And so I'm curious how you went from, sort of reaching deep into your soul to try to do some of this heart-wrenching work dealing with the fact that you're enabling behavior and you're solving problems for your children when they have to solve their own problems as a part of growing up and creating their own happiness or choosing to be happy. And yet, soon after that, you made a huge leap to another continent. So how does that happen then?
Okay, well, so by the time all this with my son that had come to a head and I had gone through the trauma track, I think I was 55. And I I had learned somatic therapy, EMDR, Imago, name it all. I mean, went through all of that and had realized that I really had become very entangled in this second marriage. And I we had traveled to Africa several times, and one of them I was in Niger, and a little girl came up to me with flies on her face, and I realized that that could have been my granddaughter, and um, and that this little girl had done nothing wrong to be born in a disease-ridden culture, and my granddaughter had done nothing special to be born in the States and to have healthy food and all of that. So that was my aha moment. Now, the timing was right. I wanted change. I wanted to get out of the marriage. I I was bored. I wanted a new challenge. And I thought, well, that sounds good. I'll just figure out how to get flies off the face of all these little kids in Africa. And one thing led to another, and I chose one of the most difficult areas in Africa to work in southwest corner of Ethiopia, and I worked with very marginalized tribes, and um, and it was the best thing I ever did. I mean, but the timing was right. It was really set up for it. And I laugh about the fact that in order to escape from the marriage, I escaped to Africa. It's a little dramatic, but it's kind of indicative how entangled I was. I mean, you get kind of enmeshed in situations, and I had to leave. I had to change where I was.
Well, I will tell you, as one divorced woman to another, sometimes those opportunities are really dramatic because sometimes, all the signs are there and we miss them, right? And it's almost
Right.
like it has to like hit you upside the head. And if the opportunity presents itself, you are at a crossroads and you have to decide, do I do I go down this path knowing it's going to be difficult? But it's almost like the momentum is sweeping you and you need something almost that immense to be able to get uprooted and start again. And I completely relate to that because it's not easy when you're in it to make a small change. It's
Right.
not big enough. It's not, it's got to be something pretty tremendous, I think, that does allow you to break that pattern and go on your own and do something else. Now, the last time we spoke, you talked a lot about sort of the all the time you had to think at night while you were helping this tribe in Ethiopia, and how you really did a lot of soul searching in that quietness, because there was really nothing else to do. I mean, there's no light and everything. And how did you continue furthering your journey of self discovery during those nights in Ethiopia?
Well, I- it's yeah, that's a really good question, and it really is the fact that I let it go for a little while. You know, I had this wonderful time in Ethiopia by myself at night. Then I ended up needing to leave Ethiopia because of the conflict. I met Bill, my love of my life. We lived down in Mexico. It was busy just trying to get my energy back because it had so depleted me. So it was like I had probably about 2 or 3 years that before I realized, I thought, oh my God, I'm not thinking anymore. I'm just doing. I've lost that time for reflection. And I remember telling him one day, hey, look, I've got to just drop out a little bit because I'm not reflecting. I'm not thinking. I'm doing. And that is really what got me on the path of making sure I take time to it first just started going to on a retreat once a year for a week. And then I learned some things, and pretty soon it started getting more and more incorporated into my life. So it's not a light switch um, as far as going from not reflecting to reflecting, but it definitely is something that needs nurturing. Just like when you're training for a sport or to do something or whatever, it you build your muscle and it starts as a little one and then it gets bigger and bigger. And now it was just like this morning when I was walking my dog, um, and it was all about the trees. So as I'm walking, I'm just really thinking about the incredible tree structure of the trees that are along my pathway. So it's not sitting in a room with my legs crossed saying Om, but it's really just being present in the moment. And I've come to realize now, especially when I'm doing a lot of public speaking, that I have to do something every day, not only from a meditation standpoint, but I need to do something every day that allows my mind to clarify, kind of like to wash my mind, to let it cleanse a bit, and to let thoughts come together, which means that I can't think about them coming together. I need to get myself in a space where I just allow my mind to settle, which allows it's kind of like letting the dust settle. And then it I can see what I have. And by doing that, I'm so much clearer in my messaging and in thinking and being able to turn the knowledge that I have into wisdom.
So what you're
That makes
talking
sense?
about, what I hear you talking about is sort of the push pull of familiarity and also the desire for clarity. And so for those of us who are doers, doing and staying busy has its own reinforcement because it's familiar to us. But letting go of the doing and resting or looking for clarity through a walking meditation like you did this morning, or if you are a person who likes to sit and, do a mantra of some sort, you have to find your way. It doesn't, one
Hmm.
size doesn't fit all, right? And so, but I
Right.
do think that the temptation of busyness for that initial feeling of satisfaction is like an easy win, but the hard road is really to sit still or to take in your environment and to be present moment to moment for that clarity that you're seeking. And so I think that's really important too, because I think our listeners need to know that sometimes staying busy all the time is a form of dysfunction as well,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
many of us run from the silence or our sacred thoughts or the things that I always feel like every once in a while you get a message from your wiser self or your inner self that gives you sort of a preview of what you could invest in. And some people go towards that and some people run away very quickly away from that. And so it's very, very interesting. And it is that push pull, and that's what makes us human. And that's what keeps us moving in a certain direction. And you always seem to answer to that call. Why do you think that is about? Why do you think that is true for you? Why do you always go towards that inner knowledge? And even if you, like everybody else, because you're human, go down a path of being busy, you know how to reel it back in because there's something bigger to be done. How do you tell us how you do that?
Well, it's totally different for me sitting here as a 75-year-old woman. Because if you asked me this 25 years ago, I would have responded by saying, "What?" Because I was so busy doing. I mean, I came in this whole process as a doer that had a very, very busy mind. And I feel that doing defined me. And now trying to transform from a doer to a beer, that's a very interesting transformation. And I still am busy doing to be a beer. You know, it's that drive inside and that curiosity and that natural ambition still comes through, but now it's coming through as what you know. I'm going to answer that this way: is that in this journey of transformation, I am discovering more and more every day how rich the body of wisdom that's available to us. There is so much juiciness and richness and wonder to behold if we just pause long enough to start allowing that to come through us. And that's why I really believe that everybody has kernels of wisdom in them to be tapped. And we just have to make that choice. And by making that choice means that it's like peeling away the different layers of an onion. I mean, you need to peel away all the clutter, that busyness, the emotional scars, the um, anything that might be getting in the way. But as you do that, that kernel of wisdom just blossoms. It's just like how the wonders of spring when you watch the flowers start poking up their heads and coming into these beautiful blooms. And that's inside all of us. And some of us have to dig a little deeper than others, but it's a choice. We all get to choose how we spend our moment in time. And I know for years, I spent it being super busy. The only emotions I knew was a busy mind and feeling numb and lonely. I mean, that's all I used to know. And I wasn't experiencing the wealth of, of abundance that's available. But once again, it doesn't happen overnight. And it's a process, but it's a conscious choice to start going down that road.
It is. And I want to move the conversation along to your book, The Magic of Yes, Embrace the Wise Woman Within. I feel like your book is really now the accumulation of the wisdom that you have slowly uncovered over the last 25 years. Can you share with us what drove you to want to encapsulate your learning in a form of a book?
So that was a big supposed to I couldn't wiggle out of. I mean, it wasn't something I really wanted to do because I'm not I haven't had a career of writing or anything like that. Um, but I also realized that a tremendous amount has been invested in me just over the ages. And I wanted to share what I learned in a way that somebody could understand and take action if they chose. And so I I was very fortunate in finding an editor that helped frame my book into different chapters of saying yes to different things, and where we could have that be a big part of the framework of the book, like saying yes to winning with the cards that you're dealt, meaning you're born with what you're born. Now, how are you going to win with this? Forgiveness, setting boundaries, becoming the curious entrepreneur of your life, learning from different cultures, all those different things. And we folded my life's journey into those different sections because there really needs to be a story and there needs to be why and what happens and how does this all work. And then after the book was written, I kept thinking, well, I don't want this book to just be about me. I want to share stories of other women in this. And so I found 16 women that exemplified the message of the various chapters. And so put a little snippet of that. And then right before it went to the publisher, I, once again, I'm walking my dog, which is one of the places where my best thinking happens. And I thought, how, how can a reader really then take action or learn from what we're talking about in a book, because there's a lot of expert advice folded in there. And what can they do about it? So it came to me that we could have a dream framework, meaning dream is just an acronym standing for desire, reflect, explore, acknowledge, and a mantra. So, for example, if my desire is to win with the cards I've been dealt, that really means what I want to do is the best version of me that's possible. So, what should I think about in order for this to happen? And what do I need to explore? And what do I really need to face the facts? I mean, let's acknowledge really what cards I've got, and so I can figure out what I'm going to leverage. And then what's a little prayer that I could pray to whoever my highest power is that will help soothe my soul along the way? So I did that for each one of those chapters. And that thrilled me. I have to say, that and writing the stories about the other women in each chapter are what really gave me the most joy. Um, because now I think it's practical. It's not just a bunch of, it's not a memoir. Even though it's got my story, there's substance. So it's worth somebody's while because we're all busy, and the people that this book really will resonate with the most are probably those that were like you and I in our 40s, 30s and 40s and 50s that were really, really busy doing and juggling a lot of chaos. And so I'm asking people to spend time with me. I want to make sure that they get really good value.
Well, I will say that as I reviewed the book and hearing you talk about it, it has been elevated from a book of your story and other women's stories to not almost, it is a workbook of style. It is a
Mhm.
workbook that if you are an individual and has a yearning or has a message that is repeatedly coming to you, that there's more, that you can take that seed of encouragement, multiply that by Lori's workbook, and put together a future for yourself that can have a different outcome than your busy autopilot life will bring you today. And so I really think that that's an important distinction, because hearing Lori's story, hearing the 16 women's stories, and then putting that dream concept into play for whatever it is that you as an individual want to enact for the remaining time you have on this earth is a beautiful motivation, in my opinion, for where our future can go. Instead of, just following the steps that you think you have to do, you can actually take control of that. And every one of us has a desire to be in control. Every one of us wants to let down our burden and pursue something that gives us joy. And so I think that in this book, in this beautiful book that feels so magical to the touch, it has in it the wisdom of so many women, so many of our elders, and so many of those women who came before us. Their wisdom is in here to help guide us into where the universe knows we're meant to be before we leave this earth. So I think that that's a beautiful message in this conversation, Lori. I really, excuse me, I really appreciate your time to help talk us through the choices we have in front of us every day, and the choices that our soul enlightens us a little bit at a time, and what your dream model can help us accomplish as we look for achieving that next level of our best self. Is there anything else you want to say before we close this conversation out that has been just so invigorating to me? But I want you to close us out and tell us anything that we may have missed that you think the viewers should hear.
I guess it would just be a plea, and that is that we all keep evolving. We all keep learning. I keep learning. I mean, since this book has been out, and it's only been out for a month, and I've started being on podcasts and listening to beautiful people like you, Jojy, that it just comes to me how much more there is to know. And maybe there's a little bit better way of putting things so that they resonate better or what have you. And I thrive on feedback. So I invite listeners to contact me. All my information's on my website, and I'm sure you'll have it in the show notes. That because we're all in this together, and wisdom is just so much richer as we are a collective. And I so much want to create a safe place, a place of no fear, in a place of feeling safe. And um, and so that's why we started that little Facebook group of the Wise Woman Sisterhood. And because we can all help each other. We don't have to be alone. We're not alone. And if you want to feel somebody holding your hand, just reach out your hand, and I'm happy to hold it. We're all happy to hold it. And we're collectively, we're strong. We are strong.
Absolutely. And that's a beautiful image for us as we end this conversation about you and I, you reaching out and me extending my hand, and
Right.
us being able to stay connected and reach out at any time. And as you know, I've joined your Wise Women Sisterhood.
Right.
I've read your newsletter, The
Right.
Sticky Thoughts, which I have just found to be an amazing piece of reading. Helps keep me reaching for the better, higher self that I have, and encouraging me that women who do with so much less than I have, that can continue accomplishing so much. I really want to thank you, Lori. I will definitely highlight your newsletter and your Facebook page and your website for the viewers and the listeners to reach out to you and to really start embracing these different things that you have, these tools to help us all get in line and do what we need to do and make the choice to invest in ourselves and to know that we can do better, whatever that better looks like for each of us. And so thank you so much for your time, Lori. I know we'll be talking again. And so
Absolutely.
I appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks so much, Jojy.
Thank you.